Riker is joining shortly. Yeah, his request has come. I am admitting him and will shortly start his session. Good morning, Dr. Riker. Your speaker is muted. Please unmute it.
Yeah, good morning, Dr. Sachin.
Yeah, yeah. Good morning. I welcome you to this session. Before you begin the session, I must introduce you to the speaker. So I'll begin that. Dear participants, today for the second session of this third day, we have with us a good academic, and my longtime friend, Dr. Nilesh Riker. Dr. Nilesh Riker is currently working as a professor at Mechanical Engineering Department of Sardar Patel College of Engineering, Mumbai. Prior to this, he worked for 19 years in heavy engineering division of Larsen and Toubro Powai, Mumbai, in the field of process equipment design and spatial analysis. He completed his PhD under joint research program of IIT Bombay and Monash University, Australia in the year 2014. He did his graduation from VJTI Mumbai and MTech from IIT Bombay. His research interests are fracture mechanics and applied machine learning. Dr. Riker, it is worth mentioning that Dr. Riker was awarded the Best Thesis Award by IIT Bombay Monash Research Academy for his PhD thesis in the year 2014. Further, he won the prize for ranking first among the MTech students when he was doing his MTech at IIT Bombay in the mechanical engineering department. And you know, in and also very importantly, when he completed his BTech from Mumbai University in the year 1998, he stood first among all the students who appeared in that examination in Mumbai University. So you can think of the personality. He has tremendous experience of uh, working in the industry. He has been in good positions there, and he is an expert of finite element analysis and pressure vessel design. So today we have requested him to deliver his session on the topic design by analysis of pressure equipment for process industry. With this brief introduction of Dr. Riker, I request him to take over the session. Thank you. Dr. Riker, please. Dr. Riker, your speaker is mute.
Yeah, so thank you, Dr. Sachin, for your kind introduction. I also thank the committee from VJTI for inviting me to this session. In this session, I will be sharing in the limited time what experiences I had in the design of a product. In this case, the product is that of a pressure equipment which belong to process industry. So we will look into what is the role finite element has played in the design of this equipment, and we will go ahead. More importantly, any product design needs to include requirements of the customers, of the needs of the customer. So while I was working in the industry, I had good opportunity to interact with the customers and understand their needs while I was designing the products. So before we begin, I just want to give what kind of problems a designer faces when you are trying to meet customer needs, or the problems which are in the realm of product design. So the problems which are there in the product design, you can divide into 4 quadrants. Those who have done some work in design thinking would know this particular diagram. On the horizontal axis, there are some problems for which the methods to solve them are known. So methods are known. And there are some problems in product design where the methods are unknown. We don't know exactly how to design that particular case. On the vertical axis is the customer need or the output that you are expecting. The first part, the customer needs are clear. And on the upper part, the customer needs are unclear. So you are not very clear as to what exactly customer wants or what exactly is expected out of your product. 80% of the problems falls, so I will call the quadrant which is here as the quadrant 1. So this 80% of the problems fall in this realm where the methods are well established, there are design codes, design standards, and the needs are clear. You want the equipment to survive for 20 years. So 80% of the problems will be part of this situation. There are situations which I'm calling as realm 2. So in this particular realm, the methods are not known. So the codes and standards, they give you design methods, but these methods have got limitations. So in this case, you resort to what is known as simulation. So you simulate the problem situation, the environment in which your product is going to work. In this case, I'm talking about pressure vessels. So the pressure vessels, what kind of loading they are going to face. You'll try to see and tackle those problems. The standard methods do not work here. And finite element, and there are various tools. Finite element method is one of the tool which is used to handle this kind of problems. So these problems, you want life, again, the life of 20 years is required, but the component cannot be designed by the established rules. So you do simulation of that particular component under the given loading situations, and finite element analysis helps you in this particular case. So about 15% problems fall in this particular region. So, and our today's topic is concerned with the realm 2. Just to mention, the third region is where the customer needs are unclear. So when you are talking to the customer just says, oh, this particular equipment, I'm facing a lot of problems. And you imagine that the problems are because of something, and you apply the known methods to solve that particular problem. And in realm 4, which in the design thinking terminology are called as a wicked problems. So there, the problems are also unclear, and the methods are also not known. So this is typical area where the innovation or new product would occur. So something disruptive, the customers are not clear about what exactly they need, and the designer also is not clear how to solve that particular problem. So we are not going into that region. What we are focusing here is the region which I have shown here. Before I start discussing about the finite element of process equipment, let me show a brief video which will give idea of how a process industry looks like. So process industry, I mean the chemical plants, fertilizer plants, petrochemical plants, oil and gas platforms, and so on. So there are a lot of industries which are dealing with the process related things. What I'm showing is a YouTube video which is created by one of the leading EPC members, and we will see how in what environment our product is going to work. So when I'm talking about pressure equipment, let's see what is a process plant looks like and how does it work. So I'm just taking you through this video. I'll be skipping some part which are not relevant here. So this is a typical view how this is a view of a fertilizer plant. So we are looking at the fertilizer plant. So have a look at the hundreds of components which are involved here. So when you are talking about pressure equipment, it is not a single, but it is a system of various equipment and the pipings which are connected with each other. And it is spread over a very long, very vast area. And this entire system has to work together. So we are looking at the various parts of a process plant, and as a product engineer, if your customer is facing problem, you would be visiting the plant and looking at what exactly is the problem. So the situations which we are looking at are as shown here. You'll have equipments which are very huge. We have equipments which are very small. They are working. Some are working at extremely high pressures, maybe of 200 bars. Some are working at extremely low pressures, in fact, in vacuum conditions. So each of this equipment will require different design requirements are there. And when we are designing these products, we are trying to capture the requirement of the customer into our design methods. So from this video, you will get a feel of what is the scale of products we are talking about, and the variety of product customization that is required. So each process plant is unique, and you will require a different type of approach to customize your design to the needs of that particular customer. Okay, so I will stop the video here. We got an feel of what region we are talking here. Okay, so let's begin my talk. I will be talking for next 1 hour or so about the various finite element techniques that are adopted in the design of pressure equipment. The engineering of pressure equipment involves not only design. Design is one part of it, but there is, very importantly, your design may be excellent, but it must be supported by the other functions such as the fabrication, inspection, the quality of materials. Knowing the customer requirements, it's important that there are explicitly stated technical documents, but there may be something implicit that customer needs and which you have to include in your design. There are, as we have seen in the 4-quadrant method, there are methods which are the standard methods. So they are designed by rule methods. So these are where the methods are known and the output is also known. The design by analysis or design by experimental analysis are the two methods which are used where the standard techniques are not useful, or they cannot be applied because they are the constraints on those methods will get violated if you start adopting them. And in this case, we are talking about the process plant. We have seen the process plant, its entire system. If one of the equipment fails, it may lead to the full closure of the entire plant and the production that is happening there. So you cannot take any risk in such kind of product. So that is why it becomes very important to have very clear understanding of what is the problem and how it is to be solved. And if the method we are using as finite element method, you must be master of that method. You cannot apply it half-heartedly without understanding. Just you cannot run something in ANSYS, get the output and say that this number is smaller than other number, so design is safe. So it is not so. You should interpret the results very carefully. And of course, the procedures are not so unknown. Many of the procedures are very well documented. So although I'm talking about the region where the design methods are unclear, in many part of the finite element methods, the methods are well established and it can be adopted. So let's look at some of the situations where one would like to adopt the finite element method. So one of the requirements in the pressure equipment are there are many connections. So many we have seen so many piping got connected to the pressure equipment. So the connections are called as nozzles on the equipment. So if this is my pressure equipment, you will see here that there are a lot of openings which are used to connect to some piping or some instrumentation. And there are a variety of shapes. Some nozzles or openings are coming very close to each other. And in such case, the design by rule approach, it doesn't work well, or in certain cases, it is not allowed at all. So you have to resort to finite element method. The second type of situation is where your geometry is very peculiar. So typically all the openings or pipings are circular in shape. But if you have for some purpose an opening which is non-rectangular, non-circular, in which case you require design by analysis. I'm just listing the problems in quadrant 2 which demand for finite element analysis for the process equipment related products. Another analysis is any process plant will have hundreds of heat exchangers. So each of the heat exchangers, there are two fluids which are transferring heat, one fluid transferring it to the other fluid for some process requirements. Now, because of this heat transfer which take place, apart from heat transfer, as a mechanical engineer, it introduces lot of temperature gradients in your equipment. So in addition to the pressure loading, you also have thermal stresses which get induced, which needs to be tackled. To some extent, the design by rule methods are able to handle this, but in very critical equipment, one resorts to finite element method. For most of the times, either to confirm your design by rule results or to have a double assurance that this particular thing is going to work. In certain cases, the equipment contains some complicated what is known as internal items for process requirements. So these internal items are usually designed by the supplier of these internals. But in some cases, since they are integrated with your pressure boundary, you need to know what is the effect of this performance of this internals on your equipment. So that is also another scenario where finite element method would be used. Another very important, and I would call quadrant 3 type of problem, where you know that in the process equipment there are a lot of bolted joints. The bolted joints which have a sealing member. So this is the sealing member, which is known as gasket, which does the sealing. So the internal pressure which is acting on the inside, it is sealed because of the gasket which is getting compressed by number of bolts which are provided on the periphery of the flange. So this is only a section of the finite element model for the entire circular flange. So in such cases, again, the design by rule methods are there, but if you have extremely high pressures or very sharp temperature gradients around this joint, the leak tightness of joint becomes a question mark, and it's very dirty problem to solve from operation point of view. Once your plant is in operation and there is some leakage, you have to take some immediate action to stop that leakage. So some stopgap arrangements are there. So a customer would always expect the product to have very properly designed leak tight joints. And unfortunately, there are no, for certain high pressure joints, there are no well established methods to design such type of joints. So there we use finite element methods to get more confidence. However, these methods are in my experience, the finite element methods give you some higher degree of confidence, but again, I cannot say assuredly that it will solve the customer's problem. So this is something which is coming in the quadrant 3, where the customer needs may or may not be satisfied. Even if you are using whatever design tools you are using, it may not satisfy that. But finite element is often used in such scenario. Failure analysis is one particular aspect, so which needs which takes extensive help from finite element analysis. So in case you have some kind of problem during the service because of fatigue loading, cyclic loading, or because of some crack-like defects which had existed in the product, so that needs to be taken care of. So that is again a region where finite element method is used. So we have seen till now that what are the different scenarios in which the finite element methods are used in pressure equipment design. Now let's begin looking at how these methods are implemented. So when you say finite element method, there are lots of software are available. Each software has got different types of elements. Then there are different types of material models are available. Different types of boundary conditions can be applied. So somebody who is new to software will get just confused by the various options which are available. So how do we implement the finite element method in such product design is we will see. Before we do that, we'll understand the nature of materials which are involved in this equipment, because when you are doing a simulation, the modeling of material is one important factor. So for these products, what kind of material models you require, that we should be clear. We'll look at briefly at that. Secondly, we will also need to know what kind of loadings are coming on this equipment. So when you are simulating, the application of the loads, which in finite element method you must have come across by now, are the boundary conditions. So there may be displacement boundary conditions, or there may be mechanical load boundary conditions, or thermal boundary conditions. So how do we, what kind of loading are appearing on this pressure equipment? We will see that. So let's begin with the materials. So there are different material models in earlier era, that is about 20 years back, when the computational resources were costly. One used to use what is known as linear elastic model, or perfectly elastic model, which is not shown here. So in this model, the horizontal axis is strain, vertical axis is stress. We are assuming that the material is having infinite load carrying capacity, and the stress is permanently proportionate to strain. So this particular model is, from finite element point of view, is simple because there is no nonlinearity, which is material related nonlinearity, which comes in picture. As soon as you bring any kind of nonlinearity in finite element solution, immediately the requirement of computational resources multiplies by manifold. So when you are having limited computational resources, you would try to use as simple model as possible. So the perfectly elastic model, you will see that many of the finite element analysis for process equipment would be based on perfectly elastic model. However, in the current scenario, there is such a huge increase in the capacity of the computational resources that one can easily use the other models which were scarcely used earlier. The other models which are available is, after this, the next, when you want to introduce plasticity of the material, you would use what is known as elastic perfectly plastic material. So in this case, the up to yield point, so this particular model has got, in addition to the modulus of elasticity, one more parameter. The first model has only modulus of elasticity as a parameter. In this case, the second parameter, that is the yield strength, gets introduced. So this model has got two parameters to fully define it. It assumes that after yield point is reached, the material becomes perfectly plastic. That means any amount of load you apply on this particular equipment, it will not the load will not increase, the stress will not increase, only the material will start permanently, it will start elongating for infinite distance. The third type of model that we sometimes use before the most correct model based on experimental data, the experimental stress strain curve would be as given by the last curve. So that is known as general elastic plastic model. One marriage between the two is what is known as bilinear work hardening model. So in this case, up to yield point, you consider a certain slope E, and after that you consider another slope for the stress strain growth. So this is the third model that is being used. And of course, you can have the actual stress strain curve and you include that in the analysis. In the today's scenario, any of these models are routinely used. In fact, one can easily use the actual stress strain curve if it is available. And most of the national standards which give for their material what is a stress strain curve, the theoretical stress strain curve is available to you. Okay, so this is regarding the material models. Next, we have to deal with how to establish the failure criteria. So you have defined your material. Now you have to define when that material will fail. So that is known as establishing your failure theory. So there are different failure theories which are available. The essential common point behind all these failure theories is that through the finite element analysis, you are getting your stress tensor, which has got 6 components. You want to connect it to a tensile test which gives you only single value. So the tensile test gives you only sigma y, whereas your stress analysis at every point will give you sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, and the remaining stress components are there. So how do we combine when the failure will occur, which will when the material will start yielding? So is it that when sigma x reaches sigma y, or is it when sigma y reaches yield strength, or when addition of the two reaches yield strength? So that is the question. So it has been long been solved. So we as a mechanical engineer know that there are different theories of failure which essentially define for the process equipment, the design is based on yielding criteria. So you don't allow the material to have any permanent deformation in any of the components of pressure equipment. So the yield criteria needs to be defined for your analysis. So before you proceed, you must establish what is the failure theory that you are going to use. There are different number of failure theories are available. So for example, you have the most oldest one is the Rankine theory, or the maximum principal stress theory, where you say that whenever your principal stress reaches yield strength, the material will fail. Then you have maximum shear stress theory, which says that when maximum shear stress theory, shear stress at a particular point reaches a certain value, then the material will fail, and so on. So there are different failure theories are available. Out of which, in pressure vessel equipment, you use either von Mises theory or Tresca theory, which is von Mises is based on the energy principle, and Tresca is based on maximum shear stress principle. So if you look at the codes, the design code, so here I'm talking about the most popular international code, which is which is given by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. So they have the boiler and pressure vessel code, which is extensively used. Almost 80% of the equipment all over the world would be or would have been designed as per the ASME codes. Now the introduction of European codes, the ratio would have a little been changed, but for throughout this session, I'm taking this ASME code as a reference for explaining the concepts behind the finite element method as applied to the pressure equipment. If you look at the different ASME codes, the two codes which are relevant to pressure equipment is one is ASME Section 8 Division 2, which is used for more critical equipment. So in this particular code currently uses von Mises theory. Few years back, that is before 2007, they were using maximum shear stress theory. The von Mises theory is more accurate. It gives more economical design as compared to the maximum shear stress theory. And they shifted to use the new failure theory. The other code, which is used for routine type of designs, it still uses the maximum principal stress theory. Okay, so we have seen material models, we have seen the failure theory. The factor of safeties which are used in the code, I just touch upon that. So you have factor of safety of 2.4 on yield strength and 1.5 on 2.4 on ultimate tensile strength and 1.5 on yield strength. So that is the level of factor of safety that is usually followed in these design codes. So when you are applying the theory of failure, you will get the yield criteria. You apply the margin of 1.5 on the yield strength before you, that is, you don't go up to yield strength, you go up to 2/3 of the yield strength. Sorry. Okay, finally, before we look into different types of analysis, we will have look at the different loadings which appear on the pressure equipment. There are certain loadings which are normal or they are continuously operating, such as the internal and external pressure, the dead weight of the various components, the contents of the vessel. The vessel may have some fluid or oil or some catalyst which will exert load on the vessel. You are connecting the vessel with different types of piping. So these pipings will exert some load on your equipment because of the expansion and contraction of this piping. You have got vessel support. So different vessels are supported at different levels using different types of supports. So this support at their location, they cause local loading on this pressure equipment. Those needs to be considered. And in many of the equipment, especially in the reactors and heat exchangers, there are temperature gradients. So thermal loads needs to be considered. And there are, apart from these loads which are continuously acting, there are loads such as wind, seismic, snow, which are the climatic loads which are coming and going. And there are loads which are very occasional, such as during the erection and transportation of the equipment, which happens maybe once, it happens once in the lifetime of the equipment. There are certain loads. So if you are transporting a vessel through ship, during the sea transport, there are some jolts which will occur on this equipment. So those also need to be considered by the designer in the design. Then during testing at the vessel or during startup and shutdown, there can be some abnormal load conditions which needs to be considered. So now we more or less get idea as to what type of product we are talking about. We are talking about a product which is containing some kind of pressure. It may also have some kind of temperature gradients. It is using materials which are amenable, which are ductile materials. So we are no pressure equipment will be made by brittle material. For the simple reason that ductile material give warning in terms of permanent deformation before they break. So that is very much crucial for these equipments. We don't want any blast or explosion to occur anywhere. So the materials are ductile, and hence we have seen different material models which are suitable for this kind of material. And the failure theories what we talked about, they are again related to the type of materials which are being used. So for the ductile materials, the von Mises theory would be very well suited. Okay, so having seen that, let's move ahead as to how the standard design codes or the established design methods define the finite element analysis for this kind of equipment. So let's look at the next part, where we are looking at what are known as what must be analyzed for pressure equipment. So when you are designing the pressure equipment, there are, as I said, there are design codes are involved, because we are dealing with equipment. We have seen initially the fertilizer plant, which has so much, it spans so much area, and the output measures in terms of some thousands of tons per day. So there is a huge amount of process fluids which are involved, and any leakage or any problem in any of the equipments is highly risky for humans as well as the environment. Hence, each country has got their own national code, including India. We are having their codes for the design of this equipment. So they are known as the design codes. So the prominent design codes which are here are mentioned in this particular list. As I said earlier, the ASME codes are adopted by most of the countries. Not adopted, but they are allowed to be used by most of the countries, including India. If you are exporting, you have to resort to whatever country code you are talking about. The European code is the one which got settled something like 15 or 20 years back, and is being used now. Apart from that, there are codes. So for India, for any steam service, you have to use what is known as Indian boiler regulations. So that is a mandatory requirement. And for pressure vessels, we have IS 2825. However, 2825 allows use of known or established international codes, which includes ASME. So my all further talk will be with respect to ASME codes, which applies to any international code has got similar design philosophy. So whatever concepts we are talking about, although I'm taking them from the ASME code, you can safely assume that they are equally applicable to European code or Australian code or New Zealand code. Okay, so let's understand how this code is organized. So let's I would just want to highlight here that there are some design by rule requirement, which is the quadrant 1 product design, and there are design by analysis requirements. So the title of this particular session is design by analysis of pressure equipment. So that design by analysis word has come from the part 5 of ASME section and division 2. So all our further discussion is with respect to this particular chapter, which spans about 100 pages in or less than 100 pages in ASME section and division 2. So these pages give a lot of instructions as to how to carry out the product design, in this case the pressure equipment design, by using finite element analysis. So obviously finite element analysis can be done by using various commercial softwares, though obviously they cannot give instruction as to how to do as per a certain software. These are general guidelines, and we will have a look at these general guidelines in a brief before we will proceed. Okay, if you look at the contents of the design by analysis or what is called as a DBA route, you will find that there are different requirements. So there is a requirement for plastic collapse, there is a requirement for local failure, there is a requirement to be safe against buckling, there is a requirement to be safe against cyclic loading, and there are requirements for certain components such as bolts, perforated plates which appear in heat exchangers as tube sheets. You have requirements for certain special constructions such as layered vessels. So if you have very high pressure, you will build these vessels by not a single cylinder, but you have multiple cylinders which are wrapped over each other. Experimental stress analysis, how to carry out, is covered. Fracture mechanics based approaches which are required, these are covered. So as you can see, the code touches all the known design theories that we as a mechanical engineers have learned, and how to implement these theories for a certain type of product. In this case, for boilers and pressure vessels, how to implement these theories using numerical method, and in this case we are talking about finite element method as this numerical method is explained in this particular code. So what is given in the code is not actually how to do step-by-step finite element analysis, but they will give which material model to use, what assumptions regarding the loading you can make, what assumptions regarding geometry you can make, what when you are combining different load cases, how to do this combination, what criteria to be used for different types of loads. So these are the things which are given by this design codes. I have summarized in the next slide the overview of all the methods which are covered by this design by analysis chapter of ASME section 8 division 2. If you look again, I will repeat that any international code will have similar structure, only the names would be different. Essentially, we are looking at 4 modes of failure which are highlighted by yellow in this particular case. So I'll just show them. So the first mode of failure is known as plastic collapse. So in the plastic collapse mode, what you are establishing is that your vessel will not break open. So it will not rupture under the action of loading, or it will not undergo full plastic deformation under the action of loading. So that is the meaning of plastic collapse in this context. The next is local failure. So whereas this plastic collapse is a general failure where we are talking about if you have a cylinder which is subjected to internal pressure, the entire wall is breaking, and that is what we learned in strength of material as a hoop stress. When the hoop stress reaches yield strength, the vessel will start uncontrollably yielding, or it will permanently deform. So that is what is checked by plastic collapse. Whereas local failure is something which is localized. So whenever the material, it is unavoidable that you rather the design philosophy of pressure equipment is to not keep all stresses below the yield strength. So if you have that impression, that is wrong. In certain regions of pressure equipment, the stresses do cross yield strength. In fact, you cannot, if you want to design something where no stresses reach yield strength, it will be extremely costly design, almost double the cost of what we are designing now. So you have to allow certain regions to cross the yield strength. When you do that, there are some plastic strains, permanent strains will get stored in the material. And these strains, if they cross certain value, then it will lead to the formation of cracks if the loading is repeated, and it will lead to failure. So the second criteria looks at this particular case. So this is more, the first one is more based on stress, and the second is more based on strain approach, strain behavior of the material. The third criteria is something which is related to stability. The first two took care of mechanical failure in terms of total breakage or permanent or local origination of crack. The third failure looks at the stability. So this happens whenever the any part of your pressure vessel is subjected to substantial compressive load. For example, if you are taking vessel which is subjected to external pressure, or vessel, you can imagine a cylinder which is having vacuum inside. The failure doesn't happen by yielding or by breaking of the vessel. It happens, you will find that the entire wall of that particular cylinder will get crumpled, or it will get multifolded, and that is known as instability mode. So it happens much before the yielding occurs. At the end of that folding, some yielding may occur, but that is separate case. At the initiation, the loads are much below what would call yielding under that case. So that is known as a buckling failure that is checked. And finally, any mechanical product or all the products are, none of the products are designed are subjected to static loads. Most of them are subjected to cyclic loading, including the pressure equipment. So even if the pressure vessel will have constant pressure throughout its service, the plant itself will be shut down for some times, maybe 5 times, 6 times, or 10 times during the lifetime of the equipment. So if nothing else, the startup and shutdown will cause that many cycles, load cycles for that equipment. So when the plant is shut down, there is no load, and when the plant is operating, the equipment has full load. So cyclic loading is needs to be checked for all equipment. There are some exemptions which are allowed where you need not do the cyclic analysis or the fatigue analysis, but in most of the situations you need to do that. Okay, so having seen the 4 top modes of failure that design by analysis approach of pressure equipment calls for, under each case, like for example, for the plastic collapse, you will find that there are alternative approaches are given by the code. So you have elastic stress analysis. So this uses the perfectly elastic model. The limit load analysis, which uses elastic perfectly plastic model. So depending on the material model which you are using, which you have seen previously, this elastic plastic model uses either bilinear or the generalized elastic plastic model. So obviously the choice between these methods depends on how fast and how accurate you want the results. If you want most accurate results, this would be preferred. But in that case, you will need to have more in that case, you need to have more computational resources. Excuse me, let me have water. Similarly, for the local failure approach, you will find that there is elastic analysis which uses perfectly elastic model or elastic plastic analysis. In buckling analysis, again, you can use elastic model, elastic plastic model, or something which is in the case of buckling analysis, which we'll see later, the failure can occur not only because of your material behavior, but also because of geometric non-conformities. So if you consider a perfect circle and subject it to external pressure, you will find that the buckling pressure or the pressure at which this particular cylinder collapses or it buckles is higher than if this particular cylinder has got some ovality. So for example, when you are manufacturing these cylinders, it is impossible to get perfect circle. You will have, I'm just exaggerating here, if your cylinder is having some ovality, the buckling pressure for this oval cylinder is much lower than that for the perfect circle. So when you are doing theoretical analysis, so here you are modeling the equipment as geometrically correct parts and then finding out the buckling pressure. Whereas in the last part, you are allowed to use the exact geometry. That means you take measurements from your product, the actual manufactured product, and then start operating on that. So that is the last approach that is under buckling. Under cyclic loading, you are having this screening criteria is something which allows you to exempt from your analysis requirements. So the exemption can be based on past experience. Some equipment has worked for 20 years, and if you are redesigning similar equipment, so similar is an important word, and what is similar is explained in this particular part of the standard. Then you can exempt, and there are some more elaborate methods which we need not go in details. So if the screening criteria is not met, that means if your equipment requires fatigue analysis, then there are different methods for fatigue analysis are given, which are again based on what material model you are using. So elastic analysis, your elastic plastic analysis. And for welds which are having, so whenever you are having fatigue analysis, the stress concentration plays an important role. And in the welds, whether very means of manufacturing, it cannot be as perfect as machine components. So you always have some kind of surface finish. You can do some grinding to give them good polish, but still they will have some non-homogeneity in terms of material, as well as in terms of their geometry, they are not perfect. So there is a special section for the analysis of welds, which is also provided. And then finally, there is ratcheting. That is, if you are repeatedly applying and removing the loading and unloading a particular component, and the component is going in plastic zone, there is some permanent deformation. Then over the time period, this particular ratcheting, the ratcheting failure means that permanent deformation keeps growing uncontrollably, and at one point of time, your component fails. So how to avoid this ratcheting is another part which needs to be seen. So this particular figure gives you a bird's eye view as to the different analysis, finite element analysis that needs to be done on pressure equipment. And they fall under 4 main branches, one related to total collapse, another related to local failure, third related to instability, and fourth related to fatigue. In the remaining, we are now having about 40 minutes. So in the remaining half an hour, we will look at these 4 parts one by one. Okay, so we are looking at the first leg, which we are talking about the plastic collapse. So as I said earlier, there are 3 modes. We are currently looking into the case where you are using linear elastic model. So we are not considering any plastic deformation. Our model is elastic only. Okay, so this is the oldest method. So so all the methods which are based on elastic model, they are the conventional or classical methods which are established long back, somewhere where the code came in picture somewhere in 1940s. So these particular methods are from those point of view. So they are a very well-established method. They are widely used, and very experienced people are there who can comment and scrutinize the results those are obtained from them. So that is the advantage. However, these results from this elastic model, since you are not actually modeling the yielding, you have to predict when the yielding will occur. So that prediction is done with some guidelines, and those guidelines can be ambiguous to, at least for a new person, those will be ambiguous. So that is the main disadvantage. That is what is being talked in this slide. Apart from that, they are not recommended for very thick vessels. So where the diameter to thickness ratio is less than 8. Okay, so the key concept in the case of elastic analysis is in terms of what is known as categorization. So let's understand this categorization in more detail. This gives you an idea as to when you are using finite element method for a certain class of products, they may have the finite element program may give you output in certain fashion, typically in the sense of displacement, 3 components of displacement and 6 components of stress at every point. Now these results need to be collated, combined, and then modified in order to interpret them. So I'm explaining this in detail so as to give you an idea about what kind of processing finite element analyst needs to do for different products. For different industries and different products, this method differ. Essentially, basically your output from any finite element model will be in terms of components of stress and strains and displacements. How to interpret them depends on what is your product and what is your standard. So what I'm explaining is from pressure equipment design point of view. So let's look at what is this categorization is about. So let me first draw a part of a pressure boundary. So I'm considering that I'm having a cylindrical vessel which is joined to, so the bottom part is a cylinder which is joined to an end cap which is in spherical in shape. So let's call this is another part. So these are the pressure components. So if you have to decide how much should be the thickness of this cylinder, the design by formula gives you what is the thickness of the cylinder. So it is governed by basically PD by 2T equal to sigma. So and for sphere, it is PD by 4T equal to sigma. So if you maintain the stresses with appropriate factor of safety, you get the thickness of this component and thickness of the other component can be obtained. Now where finite element analysis comes in picture is where you are joining this component with each other. So where you are joining this component with each other, the weld joint, and you see I have drawn a kind of a taper at this particular point. Since these two components are having different thicknesses, because the stress levels in sphere are smaller for the same diameter and pressure, you can afford to give smaller thickness for the head. And from cost point of view, you would give that smaller thickness. When you give these different thicknesses, you are joining two parts which are having different stiffnesses to each other. And when the same load in terms of pressure is applied on this component, the sphere tries to expand by some amount and the cylinder tries to expand by another amount. As a result of which, there is a discontinuity at this particular point and there is a localized bending which causes a distribution of stresses which cannot be established by the standard methods. It can be done analytically. For this simple case or this particular situation, analytical solutions do exist. But in general, you resort to finite element method because in addition to this particular head may have some kind of pipe attached to it. So because you are making an opening in this particular head because of some nozzle which is coming there, you will have a kind of discontinuity which appears there, which needs to be taken care of. Sorry. Okay, so in such case, we need to do finite element analysis. Having understood the finite element analysis, let's go back to the original purpose. That is what is categorization of stresses and why it is required. Now the stresses which appear at this weight region, they are unknown, so they need to be established. So that is one thing that we have obtained. Now the categorization is done based on three criteria. The first criteria is based on the location. So based on location, you have the general stresses and you have local stresses. So general stress and local stress. The stresses which are appearing away from this discontinuity, away from this green region which are drawn here. So the stress at a point A would be called as a local, general stress, and stress at a point, let me call very near to this discontinuity, which is at point B. So the stress at A is general, at B it is local. So that is one level of categorization. The second level of categorization in terms of from the origin of stress, why that stress has come. So based on that, there are primary stresses, primary loading stresses, and there are secondary loading stresses. So in this case, this stress might have occurred because of internal pressure. If it is so, the stresses at B would be called as primary stresses. So primary stresses are like pressure stress or dead weight of the equipment, any mechanical load which keeps on increasing the stress as the load increasing. So they are known as non-self-limiting. So these stresses are called as non-self-limiting stresses. For example, it is stresses because of pressure. As you start increasing, if you double the pressure, the stress will double at point B and everywhere. So that is known as primary stress. And the secondary stresses are essentially those which are governed by displacement or strains. So a typical example of that is thermal stresses. So these stresses are self-limiting in the sense they do not keep on growing infinitely. So these are known as self-limiting stresses or self-limiting category of stress. So at the same point B, the stress is general, it is local, and if it is coming because of pressure, it would be called as local primary stress. So when you are defining the stress at this point, we have defined that stress as local and we have defined it as primary. So that is first category. This is second category. There is one more third category which comes in picture, which is based on the distribution of stress. Now let's understand this distribution more clearly. I'll just rub off some of the part. So if you zoom this particular part, and if I take at this point another section which is moving from a point B which is on inside to a point B in that particular part. So B is here and C is there. If I plot the distribution of stresses, so at B there are 6 stress components, C there are 6 stress components, and in between also at every node which you may have in finite element, there will be different stresses. So if I plot one of the stress component, for example, if I plot sigma x from B to C, how it varies, you will find that from B to C, the sigma x variation may be something, it may be, for example, it is something like this. So for example, we are assuming that this particular distribution is sigma x is so much at point B, and it is, let's say, up to this magnitude at point C. And based on this distribution, we further categorize the stresses at point. Now, instead of calling at point B, we define it as a section BC. So the distribution of stresses is always across some section. The distribution cannot be at a one particular point. So this, for calculating the third component, we have to define some section passing through that point and then define those components. So this particular distribution, you can simply imagine to be made up of polynomial, which is, so sigma x can be assumed as some constant term a plus bx plus cx square and plus all the higher order terms. So all higher order terms I am clubbing together. The first term, which is constant, is nothing but the average stress which is acting on this particular component. That is, because of this stress distribution, which is, for example, if it is tensile, if you add up all these forces because of the tensile stress, you will get net force which is acting on this particular section. If you divide by the area of this section, you will get the average stress component. So that is known as the first component, which is called as a membrane stress. So this is the membrane stress. The second component, which is linear component, is called as a bending component because the bending stress, it has same characteristic as bending stress, that it is zero at the neutral axis. So you have the membrane at this point, you have bending at the other point, and whatever remains afterwards, sorry, I've drawn the bending component in the wrong direction. So we'll have bending in the other direction. So this is your bending component. And whatever remains is the final, which is called as a peak stress, which is used in the fatigue analysis. So these are the peak stresses. Okay, so I'll repeat once again because for those who are listening first may be confusing. For interpretation of the plastic collapse based on elastic model, you have to analyze the stress by three means. The first mean is where you are computing that stress. So in our case, if it is near to some discontinuity, it is called as a local stress. So for local stress, there are different stress limits, and for general stress, there are different limits. So the purpose of this categorization is to define the different limits for these stresses. So I did not declare that earlier. So the purpose of this categorization is for every category, there is a different stress limit. So first we have to categorize, and then each category we have to see whether it is meeting the limit prescribed for that category. So one is based on the location. The second is based on what is the origin of stress. If the loading is primary, then the loads are not self-limiting. If the loading is something like thermal stresses, then the loading is self-limiting. That is, if you keep on increasing the temperature, the stresses do not increase proportionately. They get automatically limited at one point. So these type of stresses are known as secondary. So for primary stresses, there is a different limit. There is a secondary stresses, there is a different limit. So at our point B, because of it is subjected to the stresses are because of internal pressure, the stresses are primary. And lastly, based on distribution, you can have the third categorization as membrane, bending, and peak. The peak stresses are used for fatigue analysis, and membrane and bending, they are used for plastic collapse analysis. So what we are talking here is the first branch of our analysis. The first branch was plastic collapse. We are doing plastic collapse by elastic analysis. When you are doing elastic analysis, after you complete your finite element analysis, at every point you will have to do this, or every critical point that you want to investigate, you have to categorize the stresses in terms of whether it is general or local, whether it is primary or secondary, and then based on the distribution, based on the section which you think is critical, you will do the categorization into membrane, bending, and peak. Once you have finished this, then you are ready to check whether each category is satisfied. So that is being offered by what is known as ASME Hopper diagram. ASME doesn't call it Hopper. This is the popularly known term. So this is what the figure 5.15 of the ASME would look like. So here you can see that you have got the stress category, which is defined as primary and secondary. So primary and secondary is based on the origin of the stress. Then you have general and local, which is based on the location. And then you have membrane and bending. So these are based on the distribution of the stress at that particular point. So depending on which category you are checking, there are different limits. So for primary membrane, there is allowable stress is S. If it is primary local, then the allowable stress is 1.5 times S. This S is the allowable stress, which you have seen in the first part as yield divided by, it is 2/3 of the yield. It also involves some other factors, but for the simplicity, let's assume that it is 2/3 of the yield. So if it is a primary membrane, you limit it to 2/3 of the yield. If it is local membrane, then it is 1.5 times S. So 1.5 times S becomes the yield strength. So if it is local membrane, you are allowing it to go up to yield strength. If it is involving secondary stresses, then you use something what is known as SPS, which is approximately equal to twice the yield strength. So if your stresses are originating from secondary loads, which are self-limiting, then you are allowing the stress levels to go as high as twice the yield of that particular material. So that is the gist of this particular approach, the elastic analysis approach. Let me illustrate it with an actual analysis example. So here what I have considered is a nozzle. A nozzle is nothing but a forging, which is it's a cylinder which is attached to your main vessel. That is, your main vessel is a cylinder and you are piercing it with another cylinder which is having certain shape. So that shape is given for certain region. And the loading what we are considering is only the internal pressure loading that we are considering here. And apart from that, there is no loading. So only for internal pressure, we have to analyze what will happen to the stresses in this particular region. So the steps involved will be, first you would open your finite element software, you define your material model, you define your geometry, you give your boundary condition in terms of displacements, you give boundary condition in terms of loading. In this case, the loading is pressure. And then you do the analysis, you will get the stresses, and these stresses you will have to categorize the way I explained. And then you interpret whether it is safe or it is not safe. So let's see pictorially how this is done. So the first step, you define your material model. So in the material model, essentially what you have to do, so this is the screen from ANSYS. So you need to define what is Young's modulus for your material and what is the Poisson's ratio for your material. So for this model, perfectly elastic model, you require only E value to fully define that model. So all other things are not required. But however, the ANSYS will take it by default. So that we are taking here. Next, we have to define the geometry. So in this case, the geometry is as shown here. So you have made, this is the main vessel and this is the nozzle that we want to analyze. So the second view looking from the back side is shown here. So as you can see here, you are making geometry more accurate by giving the corner radius which is provided there. If you don't provide this corner radius, your stresses may be theoretically very high, but the actual nozzle has got a radius there. The next step is to discretize your model with finite elements. So in this case, the brick elements are used to analyze this particular model. So this model is broken into different, it is discretized just to show the quality. So when you are doing finite element method, obviously one practical aspect is the results highly depend on your discretization quality. So in today's finite element software, we have inbuilt quality checks which give a good quality mesh, but you, as a good analyst, it is better to check manually whether the quality, the size of elements, especially in the region of our interest. So we know that in the region where the one cylinder is getting joined with the other cylinder, we are expecting high stresses. So there, the quality of mesh should be good. It could be bad at this point, but it could not be bad at the other point. Okay, next you have to give the boundary conditions. So boundary conditions and loading you have to give. So loading in terms of, in this case, I fix the bottom of this cylinder in the sense only in the vertical direction. Fixity is there. It should be allowed to expand radially. I will not go into details of that. Then internal pressure is applied on the inner surface. And wherever you are cutting this nozzle, you have to apply the longitudinal stress which exists here, because this nozzle is still a pressure component and there is some piping which continues from there. So when you are cutting this nozzle here at this point, actually there is a longitudinal stress which is acting. So you have to simulate that in your model. Similarly, at the top end of the cylinder, the longitudinal stress in the cylinder needs to be captured. And you see that I have not modeled the full cylinder. I have just modeled half the cylinder. So that is done to conserve the computational resources or to make the model small, since this is known as taking advantage of symmetry. Although our model does not have two symmetric nozzles, but we are not interested in what happens at the backside of this model. So we are just taking a taking a smaller model, which idea is to reduce the computational time as well as computational resources. Okay, so this is another view of the boundary conditions. Then you obtain the von Mises plot. As I said earlier, these von Mises plot by themselves are not useful for interpreting whether the case is okay or not okay. We have to first categorize the stresses. This gives you first idea as to whether the behavior of model is correct or no. Two things you have to see. One is what is the deformation of your model. So any finite element analyst would know the importance of observing the deformation. So it gives us first clue as to whether the loading is applied properly or no. So if you find that after application of the load, the material is having inward deformation, that means the stress is not there. So in which case you will have to change the stress levels, in which you have to check the boundary conditions and change them. So observing the deformation and the stress pattern is important to check whether there is some obvious mistake in loading or boundary conditions. Once you have satisfied yourself, you will go into the categorization of the stresses in terms of means the primary or secondary. They can be decided offhand because we know it is a pressure, it is a primary stress category. And since we are analyzing a local near to the nozzle, near to the discontinuity, it is a local stress. So we know that it is a primary local stress, but for establishing membrane bending and the peak stress, we have to do what is known as linearization of the stresses. So the term linearization is coined by code as well as it is adopted by ANSYS. So this particular ANSYS is used extensively for pressure equipment design. So ANSYS has included SME criteria into its software itself. So you have the criteria for linearizing the stresses. For that, as we said, that in order to calculate the linearized stresses, you need to have a section. So you need to define a section. Once you have defined the section, at that particular section, you will get the distribution of the stresses, what I explained earlier. So we'll get the membrane stresses, and you will get bending stresses, and you will get membrane plus bending plus peak stresses. So for each of them, there is a different limit which are defined by the Hopper diagram, which we need to take care of. Okay, so this gives you an idea as to how do one perform the plastic collapse check, the first branch of the check that one needs to do. Okay, now let's proceed to if you are using, instead of elastic model, elastic plastic model or elastic perfectly plastic model, the checks are little different. We will not look into that. This is one which is very popular method which we have seen. Okay, now let's look at the second branch of failure, that is the local failure. So from the plastic collapse, so we have seen plastic collapse. Within that, we have seen elastic stress analysis. Now let's look at the second branch, that is a local failure, again by using elastic analysis. Essentially, the local analysis checks for the local plastic strain levels. So you have to actually do the strain analysis in order to do this completely. So that strain analysis part is covered in the second part. However, means for the it's good for the analyst. That is much simpler method is also offered by this particular standard, which is known as local failure using elastic analysis. So in this case, subject to certain conditions, the local failure criteria is met if the addition of all the principal stresses happens to be less than 4 times allowable stress. So this allowable stress you can consider it as 2/3 of yield strength. So if your summation of principal stress at every point is less than 4 times allowable stress, 4 times 2/3 of yield, then automatically the standard prescribes that this local stress criteria, local failure criteria is met. So if you are meeting this criteria, there is no chance that the plastic strains will grow into formation of cracks. So that is the simplest approach. So what you have to do is you have to simply plot the curve, in the sense obtain the ANSYS plot, and in the ANSYS by default it will only generate sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. That is the principal stress plots. But there is also provision to define user defined results. So you can define your own results, which is addition of 3 principal stresses. So what you see here is a user defined, this STV1 is a user defined result. So you check what is the highest level of sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 3. And you, if it is within the limit, which in this case 536 is within 642, so you say that it is safe. So the second criteria for certain situations, subject, so this particular simple method is available only for, unluckily, only for certain cases. For remaining cases, you have to do detailed strain analysis, which we are not looking into at this particular point. So the second part got extremely quickly finished as compared to the first one, which we discussed very extensively. Okay, so I'm not covering. So let's look into buckling analysis. So we have got about 11 minutes. So let's try to cover buckling analysis and fatigue analysis in the remaining 8 minutes, and then we'll have some time for question and answer. Okay, so buckling analysis essentially looks for stability of your equipment. So this is how a buckled cylinder would look like. It is characterized by formation of what is known as lobes, and these lobes are corresponding to what is known as buckling modes, which we'll see a short while. The buckling may not occur only because of external pressure. Interestingly, it happens because of internal pressure as well. So what you see here is similar to what I described earlier. So you have one particular head which is joined to another cylindrical component. So this is a cylindrical component, and this is elliptical component. Instead of sphere, it is ellipse. So when internal pressure is acting, so remember that this whatever buckling you are seeing here in this particular view, this particular buckling has occurred under internal pressure. It is not external pressure has buckled this particular cylinder. Because of internal pressure, we discussed that because of discontinuity, there will be some local bending which will occur at this particular point. And this particular bending causes the compressive stresses on the outside. And this compressive stresses is what has caused the buckling of this particular cylinder. So point to be remembered is that for components, specifically for very thin components, under internal pressure also you can have a buckling failure. So buckling is to be checked wherever the compressive stress distribution is very high. It can happen under longitudinal stress as well. So for example, because of the self weight itself, the vessel may buckle, or in this case, the example is given because of the wind pressure. So because of very high wind velocity, the compressive stress on one side has crossed the buckling limit, and then you have buckling, and in this case, because the vessel is very thin, it has broken during the buckling process. Okay, so for buckling failure, again, there are 3 ways. So we'll look as usual into only the elastic approach. So I will directly go into example without going into detail. So let's say I want to analyze a cylindrical vessel which is having some end caps and some kind of support, and I want to find what is the buckling pressure for this vessel using finite element method. So I want to highlight the finite element related aspect in this particular case. I will not go into details of this. We will be modeling the vessel you can model it using 3D elements as well. In today's machines, in 2020, you can easily model with 3D elements, but it will be, even if your machine can handle it, still in today's computer also, it will take few hours to solve the buckling type of problem for the geometry that I have defined here. So earlier years, it was simply impossible to do it with 3D analysis. Even in today's machines also, it will take a huge amount of time and disk space to solve this problem. So this particular case, instead of using the 3D brick elements, which we did earlier, we will be using shell elements. So what you see here are the surface elements, or the shell elements are used here. So these are elements which are having thickness defined for them. So you can have 1D elements, 2D elements, and 3D elements. So these are 3D in the sense they are geometric, but they don't have thickness component associated like brick elements. So I have modeled here the entire geometry, unlike the symmetry that is not possible here because the buckling shape may not be symmetric. After this, there are 3 steps in which the buckling analysis needs to be done. We need not go into details. I don't want to, I'm not trying to teach how to do buckling analysis. We'll see what are the steps which are included. The first step is static analysis, where you apply the load as it is, the external pressure as it is, take a run. So that is known as a pre-stress run. After you do that pre-stress run, you do what is known as eigen buckling run. So these are the terms which are as defined in ANSYS. Different software can have different names for these. Once you have done the eigen buckling, for the kind of pre-stress that you are giving, that is the pre-stress will depend upon the type of load that you are applying, in this case pressure. So for that case, what kind of buckling modes can occur will be calculated by the software here. And the actual buckling modes are then defined in the third step, which is known as expansion pass. So here it will give, in terms of whatever pre-stress you are given, how much multiples of that pre-stress would cause buckling. So that is the final result will be available. The final result will be available in terms of what is defined here as time and frequency. So these are known as eigenvalue solution for this particular problem. So this is because this is a cylinder, it has got 2 perpendicular planes in which the same solution will exist. So the first 2 eigenvalues are identical, next 2 eigenvalues are identical, and so on. So the first buckling mode is the one which we are interested in, so which is having the lowest multiplier factor. In order to check whether the results are correct or no, we'll have a look at the buckling modes. So the buckling modes for cylindrical shapes are characterized by the lobes, as we have seen in the previous picture. So you have the lobes which are as shown here. So first mode will have 2 lobes as shown here. The second mode will have 3 lobes. So you have 3 symmetric lobes in the second mode. And next mode will have 6 number of lobes. So that is how this particular structure buckles, depending on the support conditions and geometry. So instead of cylinder, if you have cone, then you will get a different type of mode shape. The higher mode shapes are not required. It is only for the information purpose, or to check whether your model is behaving properly. But earlier modes are, the first mode is the one which is critical. Based on the first mode, we know how much is the buckling pressure. So this finite element analysis predicts that buckling will occur under 0.92 MPa pressure. And there is another check by which some factors are there by which you can calculate that the code prescribes that your buckling pressure for this particular geometry and for this particular loading case, it should be more than 0.253 MPa. So once this condition is met, then you say that the buckling is satisfactory. So in our case, that condition is satisfied. So we say that the buckling mode of failure is satisfied. So I covered 3 of the primary checks. Let's look at the last check, that is the fatigue loading. Okay, in the fatigue analysis, there are multiple types. So first part is that of the filtering, which establishes whether the fatigue is required. And we will have now look at what is known as elastic fatigue analysis. In elastic fatigue analysis, the approach is, or simply the approach is, you have for your material what is the SN curve is available. So we know what is the SN curve which is used for the fatigue design. So there will be SN curve for the material. So you find out what is the equivalent stress amplitude for your case. So you find sigma A at every point of your vessel. Look at the point which is having highest stress amplitude under the cyclic loading, and you calculate what is the life that is there for your material. So that is in just the formula. The entire procedure revolves around how to find this sigma A. So I will not go into details of how to find that. It is not necessary for this session. So what I want to show, just to give an idea, the number of factors involved or to the kind of analysis beyond ANSYS one would have to do is the equivalent stress or the alternating stress amplitude is given by the formula, which involves many factors. They relate to conditions such as what is the type of welding, if it is near to the welding, what is the surface finish of weld, what are the materials which are joined, and so on. If temperature stresses are involved, then you have to calculate you have to give some separate status to thermal stresses and so on. So having done that, you will ultimately obtain the stress the amount of alternating stress. So you have the SN curve which is available to you. So the next page gives the SN curve. So this is the actual SN curve which is used for carbon steel. So on the horizontal axis you have number of cycles, vertical axis is the amplitude. Whatever you obtained from your analysis, you enter here and you get the life on the horizontal axis. So that is the life you obtain. If you are having multiple cycles in your vessel, then you do what is known as Miner's law of conditions. So you Miner's damage law, which has that for cycle number 1, if your analysis shows that it can take n1 number of cycles and the actual cycles are smaller than that, then the damage caused by that cycle is given by n1 by that is actual cycles divided by possible cycles. Similarly, second cycle can have n2 by n2, and this entire sum should be less than 1. So that is what the fatigue design under multiple loading situation works like. So that covers the 4 branches of analysis. So here, just to summarize what we discussed here is that for process equipment, which involves lot of vessels of different shapes subjected to different types of loadings and different types of materials, 4 primary checks needs to be done. One is the plastic collapse check, which involves stress categorization as one of the options. There are other options which are available, which we did not see. Then the local failure check, which can be done by simply adding the principal stresses and checking them lesser than 1. This is the second check. And next we saw buckling check. Point to be remembered is that buckling can occur under internal pressure as well. So after analysis, you find a patch where the compressive stresses are excessive, you should go ahead with buckling stresses, buckling analysis. And finally, the fatigue analysis, where we have seen the elastic method, which is close to the textbook method. So yeah, that's all from my side. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Riker, for very interesting and informative lecture. Now I request the participants to, we can quickly take a question or two if you have any. Dr. Riker has already, somebody has asked a question. Yes,
yeah.
As ASME standard, I'll read it for you. As ASME standard considers von Mises stress criteria, what does IS 2825 consider?
No, IS 2825 doesn't have stress analysis chapter. So it gives only primary design by formula methods. It doesn't give stress analysis methods. As far as I remember, my contact with the IS code is last 10 years back. But as far as I know, I don't expect it to include stress analysis, because that writing that method would require a lot of, means you should have a good backup.
Okay. there is one question that I have personally.
Okay.
I just want to ask you in context of this course that if somebody is thinking of using a brick element instead of, let's say, the shell element or vice versa, is it
Yeah.
going to in some way affect the accuracy? I mean, can you comment the use of these elements with respect to the impact, their impact on the accuracy of the solution instead of, the computational efforts?
Yeah, that's good. In the sense, the first analysis, what you saw, that nozzle to cylinder junction, we saw 3D model. So why 3D model was used there means it is relevant to what question you are asking. So I could have used shell elements there as well. But the problem with shell elements there or surface elements there is that you cannot capture the corner radius, which is very critical for fatigue analysis. So that particular analysis was part of fatigue analysis. So where you have to accurately establish the peak stresses. So there you must use the 3D elements. If my purpose was to just do stress linearization, then surface elements will do. If I'm not interested in getting the accurate peak stresses, then shell elements would have done good. In fact, long back, 20 years back, when the computers were very scarce, we used to do this kind of analysis with shell elements only. And for fatigue analysis, we used to use analytical or some published technical papers for doing fatigue analysis in that case.
Okay. Okay. One more small thing, incidentally has come that,
Yeah.
if you are carrying out an analysis for, with the aim of doing stress linearization,
Yeah.
and if the software is helping you actually get, as you said, ANSYS helps you get this stress linearization done, how it is that, the peak loads are separated from the other loads by the software? What is the basis for it?
No, as I said, there are what you do, you average the stress, you get the membrane filtered out. You do the straight line, means you fit a polynomial. If you take the first two parts, a plus bx out, what remains is the peak stress component.
Okay. Okay. So it is that thing. I see. Okay. I got it.
It
Yeah.
is done
Thank
at the
you.
component level. Yeah.
Okay. I see. So how much, when that equation polynomial is to be, worked out for obtaining the linearization, does it do over the entire volume of the component?
No, not volume, only across the path which you are defining. So it interpolates the stresses. You may or may not have nodes along that path. So
Okay.
it interpolates the stresses along that line. So it only sees the pattern of stress along that line, along that path. So it is
Okay.
not the volume.
And with respect to the elements, it is perhaps intersecting and passing through.
Yeah, intersecting and passing through. So it has only access to nodal stresses. So at
Okay.
intermediate points, it interpolates and gets the distribution across that line.
Okay. Yeah, I got
So
it. Thank you.
that answers does internally. You can write your
Okay.
program as well for that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Riker, for answering the questions also. You have already, summed up your session in terms of the technical contents. But, let me make few comments from the point of view of, how we look at it as participants and as, organizer. I feel that, you have actually showed us how finite element analysis looks from the window, a bigger window of various codes that are used in pressure vessel industry. And yes, you actually have cautioned all the finite element users that finite element analysis cannot be really usefully done without understanding the basis for doing the analysis. And while instructing us about that, you have also given us many practical clues like how symmetry can be utilized, how one element can be replaced for another for saving computational efforts and things like that. You have also shown us the procedures to be followed for safe designs if it is to be done for the pressure equipment design using finite element. So so you have truly made all of us ready for carrying out the finite element analysis by giving all necessary instructions pertaining to the various codes that are used in practice. So with this brief uh, summary from my side, I on my personal behalf and on behalf of my institute, I thank you, Dr. Riker, for giving such an informative and useful session. Many participants have given their feedback, in the form of the messages, online, that the session was very interesting and equally informative. So I thank you for your help and your time that you have provided in taking this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sachin, and thank you all the participants for patiently listening.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day.
Yes, and bye.
Yeah, bye. Dear participants, we are meeting for the third session at 2:30 p.m. sharp.